The night had crept in quietly, swallowing the coastal town whole in its thick, clammy fog. From his post by the lighthouse window, Elias watched the creeping mist roll off the ocean like a living thing, curling around the jagged rocks below. The usual comforting rhythm of the waves was muffled, as if the sea itself was holding its breath. He rubbed his hands together, the chill seeping through his threadbare sweater. The unexpected arrival of Mara earlier that day had unsettled the steady cadence of his solitary life. She was a stranger with eyes full of questions and a heart heavy with secrets that, as he was beginning to suspect, mirrored his own. Outside, the fog thickened, and suddenly, a faint glow appeared on the water's surface. At first, Elias thought it was a trick of his weary eyes. But as the light pulsed and flickered, he felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He stepped back inside, only to find Mara standing behind him, her face pale but eyes wide with the same recognition. "Do you see that?" she whispered. Elias nodded, his voice caught somewhere between disbelief and wonder. "It's the lights again." Mara moved closer to the window, pressing her palm against the cool glass. "My grandmother used to tell me about these lights," she said softly, "how they were the souls of lost sailors, trapped between the tides, forever searching." Elias leaned against the window frame, the weight of her words settling heavily in the room. "I've always been skeptical," he admitted. "But after all these years here, watching the sea and listening to the stories, sometimes I wonder if there's more truth to them than I want to believe." They stood in silence, the only sound the faint hum of the lighthouse beacon cutting through the fog. The glow on the water pulsed again, brighter this time, casting ghostly reflections that danced across the waves. Mara swallowed hard, her eyes reflecting the ethereal light. "I came back here because I needed to understand, to face the part of me I've kept buried, the part tied to that shipwreck." Elias's gaze softened. "I know that feeling. This lighthouse, this town, it holds memories I can't escape. Sometimes I think it's the ghosts of those memories that keep me here." The fog pressed closer, enveloping the lighthouse like a shroud. Outside, the mysterious lights continued their silent dance, blurring the line between reality and legend. Elias reached out, hesitating for a moment before resting his hand gently on Mara's arm. "Whatever those lights are," he said, "we're not alone tonight." Mara met his gaze, a fragile smile breaking through her sorrow. "Maybe that's enough." As the night deepened, they shared stories, her grandmother's tales, his recollections of a love lost to the sea, the haunting weight of their intertwined pasts. The lighthouse, once a symbol of isolation, became a beacon of shared hope. And in the swirling mist, beneath the watchful eye of the ocean, two haunted souls found an unexpected connection, one that would carry them through the darkness toward a fragile dawn. The glow on the water flickered once more, then faded into the night. But the memory of it lingered, a reminder that some ghosts were not meant to be feared, but embraced. The fog showed no sign of lifting, yet inside that ancient tower, a light had been kindled, one that neither time nor tide could extinguish. As Elias and Mara turned away from the window, the lighthouse's beam swept out over the restless sea, cutting a path through the mist. And somewhere, just beyond the horizon, the past and present whispered their secrets into the night. But what awaited them when the fog finally lifted? The question hung in the air, as uncertain and endless as the ocean itself. Elias stood at the base of the lighthouse, the morning fog having lifted to reveal a calm, glassy ocean that stretched endlessly beneath the pale sky. He was already in the habit of rising early, the steady routine of his duties anchoring him against the tides of memory that sometimes threatened to sweep him away. Today, however, was different. Mara had offered to help with the lighthouse chores, a small gesture that stirred a mix of gratitude and hesitation within him. "Ready to climb?" Elias asked, his voice steady but warm. Mara nodded, adjusting the strap of her satchel before starting up the narrow spiral staircase. Each step creaked softly beneath her boots, the wooden boards worn smooth by years of footsteps. Elias followed close behind, his eyes tracing the delicate interplay of light and shadow cast by the rising sun filtering through the lighthouse windows. The air was cool and carried the briny scent of the sea, mingled with the faint musk of aged wood and oil from the lantern room. Mara's breath came in quiet puffs, a subtle rhythm that Elias found comforting amidst the silence. "I never realized how intricate this place is," Mara murmured as they reached the lantern room. Her fingers brushed reverently over the great Fresnel lens, its concentric circles capturing and bending the light like a prism. Elias smiled softly. "It's a delicate balance. The light has to be clear and strong, just like the heart." They set to work polishing the lens together, their hands occasionally brushing. Mara's touch was tentative at first, but Elias sensed her growing confidence, the tremor in her fingers easing under the steady guidance of the keeper. As the glass gleamed, fragments of light fractured across their faces, painting them in shifting patterns that felt almost like a dance. "You're a natural," Elias said, his tone gentle. Mara glanced up, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Maybe, or maybe I just like being near the light." A silence settled between them, comfortable and charged. Outside, the ocean lay tranquil, the waves whispering secrets to the shore. Mara's thoughts drifted to the wreck that had haunted her dreams, to the love she had lost and the hope she clung to despite the shadows. They descended the lighthouse and made their way down to the rocky shore, settling on the jagged stones bathed in the soft hues of twilight. The sky was streaked with lavender and rose, a canvas of quiet beauty that contrasted with the turmoil they carried within. "Sometimes I think the ocean holds all our memories," Mara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It keeps them safe, but it also reminds us of what's gone." Elias nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon where the water met the sky. "I lost someone to these waters once. It's a scar that never fully heals. But standing here with you makes me believe there's still room for more than grief." She reached out, fingers brushing his hand with a tentative warmth. "Anchored hearts," she said softly. "Maybe that's what we both need." Night deepened around them, and the lighthouse's beam began its steady sweep, a guardian in the darkness. Mara leaned against Elias, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm, a rhythm that promised safety amid uncertainty. The ocean's gentle roar was a lullaby, its endless expanse a reminder that, even in loss, there is space for new beginnings. As they sat together, the past seemed to loosen its grip, replaced by the fragile hope of connection. In the quiet moments between waves and whispers, two souls found a harbor from their storms, a place where love could anchor them, steadfast and true. But beyond the calm surface, the shadows of the shipwreck still lingered, their secrets waiting patiently to resurface. And as dawn approached, Elias and Mara both knew that their journey was only just beginning. The attic was silent, except for the soft creak of floorboards beneath their feet and the distant crash of waves against the jagged cliffs. Dust motes danced lazily in the golden shafts of sunlight that pierced the grimy window panes. Elias crouched beside the ancient chest, its wood swollen and cracked from years of salty air and neglect. With a steady hand, he lifted the heavy lid and peered inside. Mara stood close behind him, her breath catching in her throat as her fingers brushed against the edges of the fragile papers nestled within. The chest was a time capsule. Inside lay bundles of letters tied with thread so faded it threatened to dissolve at the slightest touch. Each envelope bore names scrawled in elegant, looping script, some addressed to lovers, others to family members long lost to the sea. Mara's heart pounded as she pulled out a letter, the paper brittle and yellowed with age. She unfolded it carefully, the scent of salt and aged ink rising to greet her. Her eyes scanned the words, and as she read a familiar name, a name that echoed from her own family history, her hands trembled. The letter spoke of promises made beneath the stars, of longing and impending separation, written by a sailor whose fate was sealed by the very wreck that haunted the town. Elias watched her closely, his own fingers clutching a letter that bore the seal of a captain who had perished in the storm. The words within were a haunting farewell, filled with love and regret. Written in the final hours before the ship met its doom, memories, long buried beneath years of solitude and duty, rose to the surface like the tides. He turned toward the window, gazing out at the restless sea that had claimed so much, the weight of the past pressing down on him. "These letters," Mara whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "they're pieces of lives cut short, but they also connect us in ways I never imagined." Elias nodded slowly, the lines on his face deepening. "It's as if the sea has a memory, and these words are its echoes." Together, they sat amidst the fading light, reading aloud passages that spoke of love, loss, hope, and despair. Each letter was a thread weaving their stories together, binding them not only to the shipwreck's tragic history, but to each other. The fragile paper held more than words, held the power to heal wounds that neither had dared confront alone. As dusk settled over the coastal town, the lighthouse stood sentinel, its beam cutting through the gathering twilight. Inside, two souls, once strangers, found themselves entwined in a narrative far larger than either had anticipated. The past had spoken, and now the future beckoned, uncertain but filled with the promise of connection and redemption. Yet questions lingered in the air, as persistent as the ocean's call. How would these revelations reshape their understanding of themselves and each other? Could the fragile hope ignited by these letters withstand the shadows that still clung to their hearts? The night deepened, and with it, the story of Elias and Mara unfurled, an intricate dance of love and loss, bound forever by the letters from the past. As the last light faded, Mara folded the final letter carefully, her gaze meeting Elias's. "We can't change what happened," she said softly, "but maybe we can choose what comes next." He smiled faintly, the first genuine warmth she'd seen from him in days. "Together," he replied, "we might just find a way." Outside, the ocean whispered secrets beneath the moonlight, and the lighthouse, steadfast and sure, promised to guide them through whatever storms lay ahead. The morning air was crisp and sharp, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed as Mara stood on the jagged shoreline, the tide rhythmically beating against the rocks like a heartbeat. The fog that had cloaked the town since dawn lingered, swirling in pale tendrils around her legs, cold and damp. She adjusted her diving mask for the 10th time, her fingers trembling slightly despite her resolve. The ocean before her was a vast expanse of muted blues and greys, a mirror to the melancholy that had settled deep inside her since her arrival. Elias stood on the lighthouse balcony, his gaze fixed on the restless waves. The wind tugged at his coat, and the salty spray kissed his weather-beaten face. He had watched Mara's preparations with a mixture of admiration and apprehension. She was determined to face the wreck, to unearth whatever lay beneath the surface that had haunted both their lives. Yet, the sea was unforgiving, and his heart clenched with worry. Mara's breaths came steady and measured as she slipped into the icy water, the shock of cold biting at her skin but fueling her focus. The weight of her wetsuit anchored her as she descended slowly, the world above dimming into a distorted, shimmering veil. Her flashlight pierced the murky depths, revealing the contours of the shipwrecked twisted beams, shattered hull, and scattered remnants of a life abruptly ended. Each movement was deliberate, her hands brushing aside silt and debris as memories flooded back her brother's laughter. The storm's fury, the helplessness she had felt when the waves claimed him. The ocean's cold embrace seemed to echo the ache inside her heart. A profound loneliness mingled with the desperate hope for closure. Above, Elias paced the lighthouse balcony, the fog wrapping around him like a ghostly shroud. His mind raced through every possible outcome, the worst threatening to overwhelm him. Yet, there was something about Marae, her bravery, her vulnerability, that stirred a protective instinct within him. He whispered a silent prayer to the sea, a tentative wish for her safe return. Underwater, Mara's flashlight caught on a glint among the wreckage. She reached out, fingers closing around a weathered locket encrusted with barnacles. Her breath hitched as she gently pried it open, revealing a faded photograph of a young couple, two faces full of hope and promise, frozen in time. Her thoughts raced. Could this be connected to her own loss? To the stories whispered in the town about the shipwreck? The locket was a tangible link to the past, a key to unlocking the mysteries that had bound their lives in sorrow. Breaking the surface, Mara gasped for air, the cold sting in her lungs matched by the pounding of her heart. Elias was waiting, his eyes wide with concern and relief. As she climbed the rocks, clutching the precious relic, their gazes met an unspoken exchange of understanding, of shared pain, and the fragile beginnings of trust. "You're safe," Elias said, his voice steady but warm. "I had to do it," Mara replied, her voice hoarse but resolute. "To know, to face it." He nodded, the lighthouse's beacon cutting through the fog behind them, a silent witness to their journey from shadow into light. Together, they turned toward the town, the weight of the past a little lighter, the horizon promising a future they could face side by side. Yet beneath the surface, both in the ocean and their souls, mysteries remained waiting to be uncovered, waiting for the tides to bring them to shore. The sea whispered its secrets, and Mara and Elias listened, hearts tethered to the depths of loss and the possibility of love's healing power. The journey was far from over. As the waves crashed and the fog thickened once more, the question lingered what other truths lay hidden beneath the relentless tides. With the locket in hand and the lighthouse standing tall behind them, they stepped forward into the unknown, bound by grief, hope, and the unyielding call of the ocean. Elias awoke with a start, his breath catching as the lighthouse walls seemed to pulse with the storm raging outside. The wind's howl was a mournful song, weaving itself through the cracks in the old glass panes, carrying the scent of salt and wet wood. His eyes snapped open to the familiar grey dawn filtered through the fog. But the images clinging to his mind were far from the present. They were shards of a time long buried, ghostly fragments of a night when the sea had claimed more than just a ship. He sat up, the thin blanket slipping from his shoulders, and rubbed his face with rough hands. The dream had been vivid waves, towering like walls of glass, the ship creaking and groaning beneath a violent sky, the desperate faces of those aboard. It wasn't just a dream, he knew. It was a memory, or perhaps a memory folded into a dream, a haunting echo of loss that refused to fade. Down the narrow stairwell, the soft creak of footsteps stirred the quiet. Mara's shadow appeared in the doorway, her eyes heavy with sleep, yet bright with a restless energy. She carried an old letter, its edges frayed and ink faded to a ghostly blue. The fragile paper was a tangible link to the past, a whisper from those lost in the depths. "I dreamed of the ship again," she said softly, stepping into the light cast by the flickering candle. "I was on the deck just before it sank. The cold was unbearable, but there was a strange kind of clarity, like I was meant to remember something." Elias nodded, the knot in his chest tightening. "It's like the sea won't let us forget. The shipwreck binds us, doesn't it? Like tides pulling us back to the same shore." They sat together at the worn wooden table, the letter between them, its words a fragile thread stitching together their separate pasts. Mara read aloud, voice trembling as she traced the faded signatures and heartfelt pleas. Elias listened, eyes fixed on the drifting fog outside, where the ocean swallowed the horizon in a misty embrace. Their memories surfaced in fragments, snatches of laughter, whispered promises, and the sudden shattering of dreams beneath a blackened sky. Each recalled a face, a moment, a feeling lost beneath years of silence and shadow. The dual narration of their hearts revealed the complex tapestry of love and loss, the way grief shaped their identities like watercarves, stone. As the morning deepened, a sudden gust rattled the window panes, snuffing out the candle's flame. Darkness enveloped the room, yet between them, a fragile light blossomed, a shared understanding that even in the deepest shadows, there was space for hope. "We carry them with us," Mara whispered, "those who were lost. But maybe, in remembering, we can find a way forward." Elias reached out, his hand warm against hers, anchoring them both amidst the swirling currents of their pasts. The fog outside began to thin, and with it, the weight of unspoken sorrow lifted just enough for a new day to begin. But as their hearts cautiously opened, the question lingered in the salty air. Could two broken souls, tethered by tragedy, learn to heal together, or would the ghosts of the deep forever keep them apart? The lighthouse stood steadfast, a silent sentinel watching over the restless sea and the fragile hopes of those who dwelled within its circle of light. Elias stood on the narrow balcony that wrapped around the lighthouse's lantern room, the chill of the early morning fog seeping through the thick wool of his coat. The ocean below was a vast, unchanging expanse of grey, the waves folding into themselves with a steady, relentless rhythm that matched the beat of his own heart. He breathed in the salt-tinged air, the cold biting at his cheeks, and let his gaze drift out toward the horizon, where sea and sky blurred into an indistinct whisper. This lighthouse was more than a building to Elias. It was a monument to solitude, a bastion against the chaos of the world. For years, he had kept its light burning against storms and darkness, a solitary sentinel watching over the haunted coastal town. The weight of that duty pressed on him like the fog itself, thick, enveloping, and impossible to shake. He turned away from the railing and descended the spiral staircase into the warmth of the lantern room. The brass fittings gleamed softly in the dim light, their polished surfaces worn smooth by decades of hands that had tended the great beacon. Elias's fingers lingered on the cold metal, tracing the familiar contours of the ancient machinery. The lighthouse was a living memory, its light a pulse that connected him to those who had come before, keepers, sailors, and lost souls whose stories were etched into the very walls. The door creaked softly as Mara stepped inside, clutching a steaming mug of tea between her hands. Her eyes, sharp and curious, met his with a quiet steadiness that unsettled him in a way he couldn't yet understand. "You always keep the light burning?" she asked, her voice a gentle thread against the low hum of the ocean beyond. Elias nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Every night, storm or calm, it's what I'm here for." Mara settled into an old wooden chair near the window, the mug warming her hands. "It must be a lonely job." He shrugged, the familiar ache of isolation settling around his shoulders like an old coat. Lonely, yes, but necessary. Without it, ships might stray into the rocks. People depend on it, even if they don't realize. She looked out the window, where the fog clung to the cliffs like a shroud. What about you? Who's here for you? The question hung between them, heavier than the mist outside. Elias looked away, staring down at the worn floorboards. No one. That's how it's always been. My family. They left long ago. This place is my home, my burden. Mara's eyes softened. Burdens don't have to be borne alone. He met her gaze then, surprised by the warmth that flickered in her green eyes. For the first time in a long while, Elias felt a crack in the fortress of solitude he'd built around himself. Later, as the fog began to lift with the slow approach of evening, Elias watched Mara as she sketched the lighthouse in her notebook. Her pencil moved deliberately, capturing the intricate details of the weathered stone and the lantern perched high above. The quiet concentration on her face, the gentle way her brows furrowed in thought, was a balm to his restless spirit. A small smile broke through his usual reserve. Perhaps, he thought, the lighthouse didn't have to stand alone in the dark. Perhaps, with Mara here, the light could shine a little brighter, not just out to sea, but within his own heart. Yet, beneath the tentative hope lay the ever-present shadow of the past, the heartbreak tethered to the shipwreck that haunted both their lives. Elias knew that before they could truly find solace in each other's company, they would need to confront those ghosts lurking beneath the surface. For now, though in the quiet warmth of the lantern room, two souls shared a fragile companionship amid the lingering fog, each daring to imagine a future beyond the burden of solitude. As the night deepened, the lighthouse's glow pulsed steadily, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. Outside, the ocean whispered its eternal song, carrying with it the promise of stories yet to be told. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the veil of mist and memory, the shipwreck awaited its reckoning. The light would not falter, neither would they. But the question lingered like the fading fog. Could two hearts, long shadowed by loss, find the courage to open and heal? Elias took a slow breath, steeling himself for the days to come and for the truths he had yet to share. The night was far from over.